Welcome everybody, my name is Paul Smyers. I'm a realtor in Southwest Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. I specialize in land and homesteads and country property and rural country living. That's where I live and I enjoy it. You may have received an invitation to watch this video as I reached out to people from out of town, from tax records and Craigslist, maybe in the area of Virginia, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about selling land, especially if you're not a town owner. Land, when you sell land, it's a lot different than selling a home, and there's a lot of different procedures, and it usually takes quite a bit longer. One thing about land, I want to go through a few things. I made a little list here, and I want to go through it here. One thing that you want to know for sure is you'd like to know the boundaries of the piece of land that you're trying to sell. There are great things online now that you can find a GIS, which is Graphic Information System, for every county in the United States. They usually have satellite photos and a lot of other information about land, including floodplains and 100-year floods and utility lines and so on. So you can do a little bit of research on a piece of land yourself if you own a piece of land in Virginia. There's things you can do yourself to find out a little bit more about that piece, because sometimes people inherit land and they never even see the land. Their parents or grandparents left it to them, and it's in another state or so on. So you need to know exactly what the land is and then start thinking about a value, and that's where you use someone like a professional real estate agent who can help evaluate, get a close evaluation of a piece of land value that you can put on the market and the likely customer who's going to buy it. Now, another thing that you want to know when you're selling land is if it's had a recent survey. Even though the tax map and the tax parcels, they have like indications of where a parcel is, there are times when a boundary between two pieces of property needs to be settled officially, because there might be a building that's bridging one of the borders, or there may be a stream that has moved or something like that. And especially the larger the parcel, even a smaller parcel, it behooves you to get a survey done. Now, a survey can be expensive. That's why you do a little research, and maybe there was a survey done some years ago. If the parcel that you're trying to sell was subdivided from a larger piece some years ago, it's likely that the developer, whoever sold the piece of land, they may have made a survey, and of course land doesn't change much. So if there's a survey on record, it's going to be very helpful. And one of the things that comes with a survey is something called easements. A lot of country land has an easement on it. It may be a utility easement, or it might be some other kind of thing like mineral rights. That happens sometimes, but a very common one is old logging roads that once upon a time a farmer needed to cross that land to get to his cows or something like that, and a deal was made with the landowner, say, can I cross your land? And they made this little arrangement between them, and then that easement follows through the property. And if you go to a town, let's say I came across a property I was researching one time, and it had this old easement on it, and the land that it was supposedly accessed belonged to a farmer, and he did have another access on the other side of the property through another means. So technically that piece of land was not landlocked. But he insisted on going right through this property and using that easement, even though technically it was really, really old. And the owner of this property wanted to sell it. But when you sell a property that's got an easement like that, the new owner is going to say, hey, I don't want that guy's tractor coming down anytime he wants across my land. So there are ways to settle something like that. You can either work with the owner of the easement, or you say, hey, can we ditch this now? You have another way of getting into your land, and we don't need this anymore. Or you can go to the town board, and if you present a good proposal, a logical thing, like if an easement hasn't been used for a long, long time, it's just sitting there, it can be what's called an encumbrance on a piece of property that makes it a little bit less valuable, a little bit more problematic when you try to sell it. Now, do you have any views on the property? That's another thing you want to know, because if you inherited some land far away and you don't even know the slope of it, you don't know, maybe it has some views, maybe it has some timber on it that can be used, maybe it can be leased out to a farmer for cows. something like that. So find out if the property has some assets, utility value, good soil, if it's got water, does it have a stream nearby, has it ever been perked for a septic tank, is it close to the water? That can be a problem sometimes if you try to build next to a water element. And what's around it? What kind of pieces of property are really next door to the property that you own? That comes into as a price factor sometimes, because let's say you have a property and it's got, again, road frontage is another thing that you need to keep track of in knowing how much road frontage do you have. But let's say you have the road frontage that is, say, 50 feet or a few hundred feet. You still want to know what's around it, because it may be that you have a really nice piece of land, or there's a nice piece of land, but right next to it there's an eyesore. It happens. On the other hand, you might have a piece of land that right next to it is some really great thing, or it's very conveniently located, or it's near a public park or a stream or something like that. Well, then you got a bonus. So if you have set land in Virginia that you'd like to sell, I do real estate in this area, and I cover a lot of ground. I visit Bedford County and Smith Mountain Lake, and I'll go anywhere in the state of Virginia pretty much, but south of Charlottesville is probably the best thing for me, or up 81. If you know that Virginia, along the Route 81, the Shenandoah Valley is a long valley that's on the western part of Virginia. I also do aerial photography. I have a small airplane, and I used to do photography as a business, and now I just do it sometimes for clients. You want to know what the taxes are on the property. Anyone who's going to buy a piece of property is going to say, well, what's my annual taxes? And if you're an out-of-state seller, or even just an out-of-town seller, you may not have really known much about the taxes. What maybe it belonged to your family, and then you inherit it, and then you write a check every year for the taxes on the land. Now, taxes on raw land isn't very much generally, but the larger piece of land, it can certainly be very significant. I came across one sale I think it was like $400 a year for it was a 5-acre parcel. About 2.5 was only about 2 was usable, really. Which brings me to another point. How much of the land is actually usable? Usable means it's either got lumber, or you can build on it, or it's got soil or pasture, or some other thing that's really very usable economically. It could be subdivided perhaps, or it has access, or maybe it could be used for hunting. Whatever possible uses this property has, start thinking about what the market would be. Who buys it? Like if it's just a raw if it's 100 acres of just raw hardwood forest, and you don't really want to clear it and sell the property or sell the lumber because you want it to be a hunting recreation land, and maybe it's really great because it's in the middle, all the deer go across it to reach the river or something like that. So if you have a piece of hunting land, the market for that is very, very different than, let's say, if you wanted to sell land and it was not too far from a town, and then the goal would be, okay, well, I'll sell it to a developer you can specify, like, okay, each parcel has to be a minimum of certain acres. There's another thing I talk about subdividing in another video, but how you sell land, how you present the land, you might want to subdivide it, you might want to sell part of the land, you might want to keep the best part for yourself or your family. There's a lot of factors, so that's why you consult a professional like me. You go out and take a look and see what the possible uses are. Now, there are times when you have road frontage is very, very valuable, but let's say there's a possible thing that you have road frontage on two sides of the road. You can have a property that bridges a road, and then you can also have a property that has road access on this road, and then there's another road over there, maybe a 90-degree angle, and that's got access on that side too. So if you want to, that property has some significant extra bonuses because it has two different road frontages, and it might be two different types of property altogether. Maybe one part of a property is good for recreation, maybe another part of the property is good for farming or for just roaming cattle. And speaking of cattle, just briefly here, in Virginia, there's, excuse me, in Virginia there's a lot of Angus cattle. Having cattle, I personally don't know the economics of owning a cow or how much they're worth. But let's say, for example, a large Angus cow was worth a few $1,000s at wholesale price. Well, if you have 100 of them on your property, that's a lot of money sitting on a piece of land, you see. So there are really good tracts of land that a farmer would just love to have, because then he can let his cattle just go around the property and eat grass and be organic and everything, and then they have room and everything. And there's farmers who would like that kind of property, but I personally don't know the economics of it very well. But that's easy to find out. Virginia has a state website that talks about how many cattle farms there are in Virginia and so on. But that's just one idea about how to use land. So I don't want to make these videos too long, but if you have land in Virginia and you'd like to sell it, or you just like to evaluate it, or maybe you want to petition it or something, you just want to get some idea, professional feedback about the value of a piece of land that you have in Virginia, and then I'd be happy to talk to you and answer any questions. And you can contact me on the phone number and the email address that's on this video. So thanks again for listening.